Today I'll be talking about my experience in a confinement center over here in Malaysia. So the first thing I wanted to touch about is, what is confinement all about? So what happens is that once a woman gives birth, there will usually be a period of time, usually it's about a month, after she gives birth where she should be resting. And this period of rest, usually what they call it is the confinement period. So in this confinement period, at least from a Chinese cultural standpoint, it's time for a woman to rest, recover after giving birth. And there are some things that you can and cannot do, again, from a Chinese cultural or a Malaysian Chinese cultural context that she can and cannot do. So for example, some of the things that she cannot do, it's essentially she should not be touching water or very minimum contact with water. So that means they shouldn't be washing their hair, washing their hands for that whole month. This is because they believe that once you touch water, your bones or something is gonna get wind, get air, and then when you're older, you're gonna feel the effects of that in terms of having bone pain, that type of thing. And then the other thing is that you shouldn't be drinking water during this month as well, after you give birth. And then what else? Oh, the other thing is that you also shouldn't have air blown at you. So you shouldn't have, for example, you shouldn't be opening the windows, your doors, and letting the natural air blow at you. It's the same concept where later you will get a lot of wind going into your body, and then you can't expel it out. There are some things that you can do. So for example, within this whole month, you are supposed to drink red dates water. So the theory about that is that the red dates water, it will replenish the nutrients in your body. And also during this month, you are expected to eat heaty type of foods. So for example, ginger, and then some rice wine, if I'm not mistaken, again to build up the heat in your body back. And yeah, those are just a few examples of the things that you can and cannot do. There is more, but I'm not an expert on it. This is just basically what I have learned so far based on my experience and what other people have shared with me so far. The second part I wanted to touch upon is essentially, how does one engage confinement services? So I wanted to break it down a little bit. So essentially there's two ways. One, you can engage a confinement lady slash nanny, so essentially an individual who will stay at your house, or you can choose for them not to stay, but usually you would want them to stay so that they can take care of the mother and the baby as well. So usually for confinement ladies, they are quite strict in a sense that they would follow the confinement practices, but of course there are confinement ladies who are not so strict, they're more modern. So again, it's just basically how you filter out each individual. And then secondly, you can actually stay at a confinement center. So confinement centers are usually more I would say more modern currently, and in Malaysia, confinement centers are an emerging trend. So about, I think, 11 years ago, there wasn't much confinement centers, or at least not that I was aware of, but now in the current year and previous year, when I was researching which confinement centers that I would be interested to, there were actually a lot, and the price range is quite significant as well. It could be affordable to very luxurious. So again, for confinement centers, they are more I would say they're a little bit more modern, and they usually, again, depending on the confinement center that you're looking for, there's more home styles versus hotel style. They also they might engage nurses, or they might engage confinement ladies inside the confinement center as well. So it really depends on your preference which one you would like, and later on I will touch upon the factors that factors to consider when you want to engage whether a confinement center or a confinement lady. Alright, let me share my personal experience staying at a confinement center here in Malaysia. So, in terms of the confinement center that I stayed at, I took a 28-day package. That's the standard package that they have, and at the confinement center, they hire or they employ confinement ladies instead of nurses. So, the confinement ladies were the one taking care of my sweet boy for the full 28 days. And at the confinement center, they had 5 meals as well: breakfast, lunch, dinner, tea time, and supper as well. For the lunch and dinner, they have herbal soup, and usually the herbal soup for each day is the same, just that for each day it's a different soup, but there are some days that could have the same soup. And the purpose of these herbal soups is basically just to give you additional nutrients, get your health back on track. So for some, if the ones that I remember at the top of my head, for example, some was to remove blood clots, rejuvenate your body, those type of things, vitalize you, those type of things. And they had a small pantry as well where you can make those postnatal milk, and they had Milo, oats, and biscuits as well. So essentially, just a small, simple pantry. At the confinement center as well, I could it's a small confinement center, so at maximum capacity it could have 8 mothers, and you can have your husband stay with you as well, and you can have your child staying with you. A small child, I'm not sure what is the maximum age, but you can have, if you have a toddler, something like that, they can stay with you as well. At the confinement center, they had some classes as well. So they had, for example, postnatal exercise, some simple exercise that mothers could do after they give birth, so that it's not too straining for them. And then we had some safety, like first aid training, for example, what to do if your baby was choking. But this is not a certification, it's basically just teaching you some basic skills, and give you basic information on what to do should that happen. In terms of the experience that I had, essentially overall I would say it was okay. So in terms of the owner, for example, she would consistently have a chat with me and my husband, asking us how we were, etc. And she was the one who also helped me get started on my breastfeeding journey. So the confinement center that I was at was very breastfeeding friendly. They had a lot of pumps that you could try out and see, before you wanted to buy it outside of the center. In terms of the confinement lady, the first confinement lady that was assigned to us was a temporary one. The reason being because the main confinement lady was on her annual leave. So for the first confinement lady, she was a bit, I would say maybe not so strict with the rules, or she was a little bit more friendly, I would say. So later on, when the main confinement lady came back, I didn't really have a great first impression of her, because I just felt like she was trying to push what she knew, her knowledge on myself, and it just rubbed me the wrong way. I'm not sure whether it was really that was her intention, or it was more towards I'm a new mother, don't like really people pushing what they know on me, etc. But eventually I sort of got a sense of her style, and then towards the end it was okay. In terms of the food, there was a lot of ginger in the food. Again, like I was mentioning, is that it's to help you, get the heat back in your body, or to make your body at least heaty, because after you give birth, your body is more prone to being cold. And one of the things is that usually in the mornings they will prepare noodles, and up to a certain point I was quite bored with noodles already, but here and there they do have a little bit of western, like muffins, cupcakes, those type of things. But the breakfast usually, up to a certain point I was really bored with the noodles already. But alright. And then in terms of the center, you have the option to bring dome as well. um, Again, it's to cook in your food, that type of thing, so that to help you feel the warmth in your body. And I personally didn't like dome, because I'm someone who doesn't like alcohol, so I was really dreading it. And how one of the main ways that they cook it is they make their own chicken essence and then they cook it with the dome, and I don't like it, but they said it's beneficial for my health, so I decided to try it. But I usually dreaded whenever I had to drink it because I just didn't like it. So I have a little bit of a sad story to tell. So during our stay, my husband actually got COVID. It wasn't from the center, it was when he was out. Um, when he was out, and so he was isolated at home, and I was staying in the center. So it was sad because we were almost at the end of our confinement period, and I was sort of looking forward to going home. So I had to extend my stay there for about a week. And the owner was, pretty flexible about it. There was a room for me, like I could stay in the same room, because there wasn't any customers coming yet. So yeah, I extended that, and she gave a little bit of a discount, so I was quite happy about that. As part of my confinement package, there was actually a newborn photography session where the owner, she had the props for to take newborn photography, and then she will use her phone to take the photo, and then send it over to us, the edited one. But I requested for the unedited as well because I just like having a lot of photos in my phone. Again, overall, my stay at a confinement center, I'm glad I did it in a sense that I got to experience and sort of having someone else to take care of my baby during that time. One of the things that I wish I could have changed, but I'm not sure how it would have been possible because I would have been quite tired, and basically as a new parent I don't know what to do, right? Is that I wish I had more time with the baby. During my stay at the confinement center, the baby would be staying at the nursery, and then when it was time to breastfeed, something like that, they would bring the baby up to breastfeed, that type of thing. I wish I had additional time, but even with the baby breastfeeding, it was quite tiring for myself because during that time I was still learning how to breastfeed the baby, and sometimes it can be quite frustrating as well. It's quite mentally draining, physically draining as well. So that is one of the things that I wish I could change. But during my stay at the confinement, I one of the things that you shouldn't be doing is washing your hair, but what happened is that I actually washed my hair after I gave birth, so I already broke the first rule. But it's okay. um yeah, it's okay in a sense that, again, these are all just traditional cultural things that we do. Sometimes it was just passed down from generations. One of the things that maybe during our grandparents' time or earlier before that, for example, there are some things that you shouldn't be doing because of the situation at that time. So for example, like not washing your hair, or not touching water. Probably during that time there was not easy accessibility to hot water, so there was only cold water. So obviously, if you were to if it was back in those days, you wouldn't be feeling warm when you touch water or anything like that. You will be feeling cold the whole way. So that's one thing to consider. In terms of choosing between a confinement lady versus a confinement center, there are some general considerations to factor in. Number one would be the cost. Generally, if you go with a confinement lady, they are cheaper, um, versus a confinement center where the prices could range from around 8,000 to the most expensive I've seen so far is about 30,000 Malaysian ringgit. The second general factor would be the location. Would you, want to have your confinement period at home in the comfort of your own home versus, going to a center where it could be more home style, or more hotel concept. And third, general factor would be, the trust. Would you want to trust and individual versus trusting a system. Individual would be the confinement lady, where based on their experience they are doing what they do best, based on the experience they have so far, versus a center where they have certain SOPs, for processes like how to take care of the baby, what to do with the mother, etc. So those are the general factors to consider. I'll dive deeper into confinement lady specific considerations versus confinement center considerations as well. In terms of a confinement lady, the factors to consider is, number one, do you like them as a person? Because for confinement ladies, usually they'll be staying with you for the full confinement period, about a month. So whether you can get along with her and whether you trust her, because this person will be in your house staying with you. I have heard of some stories where people really love their confinement nannies, while there are some horror stories in regards to the confinement lady. So again, this one you might not really experience it till they stay with you, but you can possibly get referral from somebody else, like your friend groups who have experience with their own confinement ladies. And then secondly, another thing to consider is that their cooking style, whether you would like what they cook, whether they are cooking it too heavily, too herbally, that type of thing. So I'm not sure whether it's possible, whether you could get a trial run. Usually I have not heard of this, but possibly you could ask for them before you hire them on. But usually I don't think that's the case, that you will be able to do that. And then thirdly, in regards to cooking, whether they'll be cooking only for you, or could you hire them to cook for your your husband, your children as well. Usually they would cook for yourself. They could cook for your husband, but again, that might be an additional cost. Yeah, so those are the specific confinement lady factors that you can whether you wanted to consider hiring them or not. Let me take you through the considerations if you wanted to stay at a confinement center. So for a confinement center, one of the things to consider is the environment. Are you looking for more of a home style or a more hotel style? There are different confinement centers that cater to this, so it just depends what you would like. The second thing to consider is location. In terms of location, whether you would want the confinement center to be more in a more secluded area, there could be more greeneries, or it would be just more quiet, or in a more busy area. I have seen some confinement centers that they are smack in the middle of a lot of shop lots, very busy area, so whether you will be okay with that. And also in terms of location, whether are you looking for a confinement center near your house, near where your husband, your partner is staying, so that they can travel back and forth easily, or it doesn't matter to you, and you can stay further away from where you're staying as well. Another thing to consider is whether you would want your husband and children to stay with you. So for some of the confinement centers, for one, I saw that they provide a single room. So in that scenario, your husband or children wouldn't be able to stay with you. But for other confinement centers, they provide queen size bed, king size bed, where your husband can stay with you, or your younger children can stay with you as well. So that's one of the factors to consider. And another thing to consider is when you're looking at confinement centers, whether they employ confinement ladies versus nurses. So it really depends what you're comfortable with. For confinement ladies, they have more experiences handling children. Again, it also depends whether they hire newbie confinement ladies or very experienced confinement ladies, and whether how experienced they are. They have more experience taking care of newborn children, versus nurses, they might not be as experienced. So what I've heard is that sometimes they hire newly graduated nurses as well. So you just need to take note of that and check with the confinement center, who do they employ, and how experienced they are. Another thing to consider is the caretaker to newborn baby ratio. So for some centers, they have one nurse to three babies, but in reality, they might have one nurse to 4 to 5 babies. So that's something that you really need to take note of. And from that, you can actually see, how densely populated their confinement center is, like how many, what is the maximum capacity the center can handle. Is it like 10, 20, 50? So then you will get a feel of how many caretakers to baby ratio, because you would want the caretaker to try to have their full attention to each individual baby. And if that they have more babies to handle, it's gonna be very hard for them to do that. And one of the other things to consider is the freebies you might get. Okay, so you might or might not get it, depends. So at my confinement stay, when I completed my confinement, I got freebies. They deem it as graduation gifts. So your center may or may not have it, or you can actually check with them if they have any samples that they can share with you, like for example formula samples or lotion samples, pampers samples, because um, those what's that called, those brands might liaise with them to give free samples out to their customers. Another factor to consider for confinement centers is the deposit that you pay, whether it's refundable or extendable in certain scenarios. So one of the factors, when I was searching, it's, let's say, okay, I have to pay a deposit right now. Let's say, touch wood, should anything happen and I'm not able to stay at the confinement center, what would happen to the deposit that I have paid? So for some centers, they will fully refund it to you, but of course you have to show medical related reasons why you're not able to stay. Another one that I saw is that they will extend, so let's say initially you were gonna stay for 20th May, but because something has happened, they are able to keep your booking for 2 years. So within that 2 years, you have to stay there, or you could transfer it to somebody else, but that might be a little bit difficult. So that is just a factor for you to consider when you're looking for confinement centers as well. So in terms of confinement centers, always check reviews. So how do you check reviews? Essentially, number one, use Google, like type the confinement center's name, plus the word review, and then see what you can find. Another one would be Facebook. So I would be quite wary for for centers that have a Facebook page but they don't have any review section. There are some that don't have review section, and I'm quite skeptical about those, because what are you hiding? Like, why don't you review what your customers have said about you, etc. So that's something to take note of. And another one that you might consider but you might not get much traction on is Loyat as well, which is a Malaysian centric forum where you might be able to find some reviews. For confinement ladies, it's very hard to get reviews, right? So I know there are some Facebook groups where you might be able to uh, hire confinement ladies through those Facebook groups. You might be able to ask for if anyone has heard about them, but it's very difficult. So for confinement ladies, I would strongly recommend you hire someone through word of mouth that you heard is quite good, or someone reliable actually giving feedback about them. But again, with all, always look for reviews. So all in all, that is my personal experiences staying in a confinement center. I hope this video has helped some mothers get better understanding of the practice of staying in, of having a confinement period. Again, my experience is based on the Malaysian Chinese cultural type of confinement. There are different type of confinement centers as well in Malaysia, but I don't have much experience with that. But if you do have any experiences or questions, feel free to leave them in the comment box below, and I will answer them the best that I can. Till then, thank you so much, and if you like my videos, hit like and subscribe. Bye.